Hello and welcome to The Good, the Scaz and the Rugby in partnership with our friends at Allianz. We've got the gang back together in their respective corners of England. How are we doing, Emily Scarrett?
Yes, very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. We got the Six Nations for my birthday over the weekend, so February started off well, Mike.
Yeah, how was the birthday?
It was lovely. There is a refrain forming here. Guess where I spent it? In a pub. Yeah, but good. Loads of. It feels like rugby coming at us, and so nice of the men's Six Nations to form a bit of a curtain raiser for the real event to follow soon.
Exactly, it was nice of them to arrange that diary. We put in a request. You know, we're movers and shakers at the Good, the Bad, the Rugby, and the Good, the Scaz, the Rugby. So we did that especially for you. You know that.
Oh, so kind. Emily, how is the rehab coming on?
Yeah, getting there. Last week I did a little bit of team training, kicking a ball a bit. So yeah, hopefully still remember how to pass and catch and kick a ball. So it's getting there. Yeah, slowly but surely. It'll still be another, 4 or 5 weeks or so with everything going well. But yeah, we're getting there. Thank you.
Has that been like a huge, adventure to just get back into that phase of it now?
Yeah, it's like the return to run phase is always, it's one that you really look forward to. And then as soon as you're doing it, you're like, everything hurts. Everything hurts. Why am I doing this? But yeah, no, it's been good. Like my calves have just blown up because obviously they've not done anything for such a long time. So just things like that. But yeah, it's been good to get back out there. I haven't missed the cold weather though. It's been quite nice training inside for most of the winter.
Welcome back to it. Now, speaking of not such warm welcomes, we've managed to convince an Olympic legend to join us, even though we couldn't have her in studio this morning. But we're just so excited for the fact that she's managed to squeeze away some time, which I don't even know how she does. A 2-time Olympic champion, 3-time world champion. She made history last year in Tokyo when she became the first woman to return to the GB rowing team and make it to the Olympic Games after giving birth. It's the one and only Helen Glover. Welcome to The Good, the Scaz and the Rugby, Helen.
Downtown London. Oh, you're back. Sorry, you cut out there, Elma.
Oh, okay. Helen, welcome. You have done some work with Emily, so the two of you are well acquainted, right?
Yeah, I feel like whenever you're in the world of sport, especially as a woman, I feel like you band together a little bit as well. So, and I've always felt like as a rower, I had really nice support for the rugby girls and always followed their careers as well. So, yeah.
So tell me, what was your first impressions of her? So when did you first meet Emily?
Yeah, really. and don't hold back here, Helen. Please don't. Scaz comes out as a legend on everything that we ever do, and she just bosses all around. So give us some truths.
I love her ego even more now because I actually heard of her before I met her, and I think it was from James Haskell because I was at an event where I think Heather and I were up for the same award as her or something. It was quite a long time ago, and I remember chatting to James, and he was like, Emily is basically the best all-rounder you've ever met in your life, and she's this phenomenal talent. And then I met her, and she was really lovely as well. And yeah, sorry everyone, I can't dish any dirt.
Let's move on quickly.
I think that was the BT.
It was, yes, that's what it was.
Sports BT Action Woman of the Year wasn't it? Yeah, that was a long time ago. Hask was actually, I don't know how I managed this, so I didn't really know Hask that well at the time, but Hask was like my almost like my supporter. I think every one of us had a somebody in the male world that was almost like their advocate, and I don't know how I managed it, but Hask was mine.
He was doing a great job.
Yeah.
So you basically got the loud hailer.
It's generally a curse if Hask is on your side.
Well, you got the loud hailer of rugby to be your big up man who just warms the floor for you to come through. So I think that's good going. Helen, how are things? I alluded to the fact that I don't know how you managed to squeeze out some time to do this. Most people, when they have a toddler and a set of twins in the house, hardly have time to brush their hair. How are you doing these days?
Well, I haven't brushed my hair, but yeah, it's really nice to be able to go and have, like, even if it's just escaping to the spare room, to have a chat with other people who love sport, and you can feel like yourself and you're talking about the things you've always talked about your whole life, rather than like nap schedules or something.
I was saying this morning, when you need to be organised. So Lucas is 10 months now, nearly 11 months, and when he can have a lie in, he can do whatever he wants. He wakes up at like 5 to 6, bang on the dot. Whereas today, I really wanted him to wake up at 5 to 6 today, and I got the other kids up, and he was still fast asleep. I'm like, I don't really want to wake him up, and then I had to. I was like 7:30. I'm like, mate, you've got to get up, get out. So we need you in the car. Cause he's doing the school run with the other two to give me an hour to get to do this. How was the birthdays? I know obviously Elma had a birthday, but the twins had their birthday in January, didn't they? How was that?
Yeah, they had their second birthday. It was really nice, actually. It was kind of, I always find it a bit of a milestone with them, because when they were born, it was just before we went into lockdown. And this was their first birthday that they're kind of like, we were able to see people, and they almost met people for the first time, and they're 2, and they met them at their second birthday. And it kind of shows me like just how much has happened in that time, in that time from they were born, and so much, I mean, just so much unpredictable stuff happening. But yeah, it was really nice just to have like a normal day and a normal birthday, and yeah, it was really good.
Yeah.
I love that Insta post. I love that Insta post of them, you trying to hold your other one away from blowing the candles out. It's so good. That's just like, well, I have absolutely no idea, but that looks like real life parent life.
Like, we were pretty much having to tackle Logan to the floor. He's 3.5, and he was gonna blow their candles out. And so we're putting him down as the twins are like just pathetically trying to almost spit on the cake to blow it out. But no tears.
Who does Logan take after more? Is that you, or is that Steve?
I think they've all got elements of both of us.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really, I don't know, actually. They're really developing their own little personalities and trying to kind of see who's going to be interested in what. I think maybe Kit, the twin boy, is probably most like me so far. He's quite fiery and stubborn. Yeah, so he's probably most like me.
I love that those. I love that those are the qualities you're clipping to onto yourself. But it is probably understandable, considering what you've achieved, that there's got to have to be like a lot of fire there, not a small amount of it. And you're taking them out on kayaks and out onto the water even when they fall asleep. They're still. It's almost like they joined your merry kind of way of doing things, instead of you guys like just staying bogged down at home with the kids.
Yeah, definitely. I think when Logan came along, I was really like, he's gonna, when you've got one, you can kind of like they can come along with you and you can do fun things together, but you can do really what you like and they can come along and make it fun for them as well. I think when the twins came along, I'm just now realising, now they're starting to get they're walking, they've got their own personalities. I'm like, okay, actually the day has to revolve more around what you're doing. But the great thing about the outdoors and all those sort of things and those adventurous activities is actually it's what I want to do anyway. So if you go paddleboarding with them, or canoeing or kayaking or hiking or anything that actually I would, okay, it's at a much slower pace and it's not quite the same, but it's so much better because it's through the eyes of your kids and you're watching them develop a love for something that you love as well. And hopefully you're creating the ability to do it with them through their whole childhood, because you're introducing it to them gently when they're little. So yeah, it's amazing. It's really fun. It's obviously more fun in the summer. It's a bit tricky in winter where you're kind of trying to wrap them up and like persuade them it's great being cold and things. But yeah.
You're doing better than I can. I can't even get mine out for a family walk. Like, no, it's cold outside. I'm not going outside.
Yeah, the walks are a bit at the moment is quite tricky. Like a lot of bribery is used.
When you say bribery, it's interesting because you're now trying to also encourage other people to do more of this kind of thing. So there's got to have to be some carrot and some stick involved. Tell us about the Supermum Adventures.
Yeah, so I'm just doing it on my social media channel through Cotswold Outdoor, and it's basically on the principle of the fact that you know, especially this time of year, it's really great to be outdoors, but sometimes you can be stuck for ideas. And I was definitely finding, when I said, let's go out for a walk, we would stay within a 30-metre radius trying to herd cats into the same rough direction and not getting anywhere. And having a bit of a purpose about why you got outside, it's just quite relieving, even if it's just to like go for a treasure hunt, build a bug den, then maybe something a little more complicated or big adventure style, like building a den or making a fire. So on this series, I'm just kind of talking through how to do it with your little ones, and hopefully kind of just providing a bit of inspiration in the few months where it actually can be quite tricky getting outside.
Is it basically just firing up a firelighter and then setting the fire, or are you really getting into there and getting you flint together?
I actually did do steel and flint to start my fire. It's the first time I've managed to do it in my whole life, and it was filmed, so that's a big win. But no, I think if doing it in real life, you're going to maybe try it like that, but have a lighter up your sleeve to use if you need.
She's excellent. Even at making a fire out of literally nothing at all. So you're challenging some celebrities to try each of these adventures as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think part of the fun is trying to get other people to do it and show that actually it's not all going to be easy or look great or be Instagram perfect. It's going to be different for everyone and different for where you live and everything like that. So yeah, I'm kind of going to tag in a few people onto the post to see if they can have a go as well.
I think you should get Mike involved, Helen.
Definitely.
I think you should get Mike involved with his little ones, and I think there'd be some very good non-perfect Instagrammable stuff in that, I reckon.
Yes, there would. I'm not sure that that's just do it, Mia. I don't think that'd be good on Instagram.
So you're getting out there and you're really trying to encourage more people to do it. Have you seen a shift? I mean, the amount of times, just based on your Instagram presence, the amount of time that you guys spend outdoors, have you really seen a shift in how people are kind of spending their downtime and how much more people are making use of their downtime to spend it outdoors?
Yeah, I have. I feel like when we went into lockdown, everyone really appreciated what's on their doorstep, and because they had a smaller amount of time to spend it outside, they thought more carefully about what they were going to do and where they were going to go and where they were going to explore in their area. So there's a massive increase, and in things like wild swimming and when the swimming pools were closed, and there's a huge increase. And then I feel like there's just now beginning to be this bit of fatigue because it was great to begin with, and people bought their paddle boards and their kayaks and did all these online purchases they never would have done before. And now there's just a bit of fatigue of okay, well, what are some other ideas? What are some other things? What are some really simple wins, especially when you've got children, to ways to get them involved and get them out. So it's just those simple wins when we're really, I think people feel really desperate to get outside and desperate to go and do these things. It's just that little helpful hint to allow you to do it.
Can you please tell me it's not always that easy to get your kids outside doing all this stuff, though? You're telling a slight Instagram lie, aren't you? I mean, it's like once a week. It's not. It's every day we're doing this joyous family thing. Just please tell me it doesn't just work that way. It definitely doesn't work that way in this house.
No, definitely. And some days you'll kind of get out the house and it'll be fine and fairly seamless. But most days it's not. Most days, by the time I've put the socks and shoes on one child, the first child I've dressed will be literally naked. Then you go round and start again, and then it can be just a battle. And I'm not saying everything you have to do is to go out and do this little adventure. Most days you go to the park, or most days you do something, but occasionally sprinkling in something which is different, it keeps them engaged, because it does mean, what are we going to go out and do today? What are we going to do that's different? And kids love that. Kids love that excitement of not knowing what's going to happen.
It works quite well with both of you guys in terms of what Steve does as well, because he can fire up their imagination in terms of the wildlife that's out there and everything that he knows about what he does as well. It's kind of a perfect partnership, isn't it?
Well,
have you found that? It just works really well together? It
works amazingly, especially when we're out together, because they ask me a question. I can say, ask Daddy. But if I'm out with them on my own, I have actually told Logan before what an insect is, and he said, no, Daddy told me it's and he's corrected me on things because he's been out with Steve and he's learned something. But so I have to make sure I get it right. I can't fob them off too much with the answer. But yeah, no, it is much easier when you're both on board. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you that kid when you were growing up? I mean, were you also kind of always outdoors?
I was massively outdoorsy. I grew up in Cornwall, and I feel like there's just naturally a more outdoor lifestyle when you grow up in a place like Cornwall. And for me, like whenever I talk about what I was like as an athlete as a kid, yeah, I went to the sports clubs and things like that, but I spent a lot of my time playing relay races and chase on the sand dunes. And for me, it was a game. For me, I was having fun. But actually, I look back and I was like, that's the best training session ever. I'm running around up and down the sand dunes, chasing my brothers. And I think that definitely my early sporting career started with play in the outdoors.
I love that. I think that's like so important. And obviously, I grew up on a farm, so I had a similar experience in terms of being outdoors a lot. Older brother, so similar kind of vibe in terms of just getting out there and doing things. But I think that was such a huge part of, I guess, maybe why I went on to do what I did, or the mentality that I have, or all those sorts of things. And it was interesting. The thing that we both did for Allianz was almost the advice you would give to your 8-year-old self. That was what it was all based around, wasn't it? And it was interesting listening to yours and Dave Sarah's stories and a lot of the rugby girls. And it was all very similar in terms of what we said. And it was all around that like play, that fun, that engagement. I think, so many athletes are so similar with that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and the more athletes you meet, the more you realise that I think I feel like there's quite a lot of parental pressure to kind of almost design a pathway for your kid and get them into different clubs when they're younger and stuff like this. And I just think the more people I speak to who are excellent in their field as an adult had that sense of enjoyment and play and use of the outdoors when they were young.
So the highway to becoming a double Olympic gold medalist doesn't start by plopping them into some sort of water-faring device at age 5. It's just a love for the outdoors and exploring and playing fun.
Yeah, I mean, there are loads of ways to do it, but I think if you want to increase the chances of somebody staying in a sport and loving it throughout their life, then I think you've just got to start with them loving it when they're young.
So what were you playing when you started out actually kind of playing competitive sport? Because you've spoken about being super competitive, and I'm sure that attracted you to competing in some way, somewhere very early on.
Yeah, so I used to play, well, my first love was running, really, so cross-country running, and then hockey as well. So hockey and running were the things I did like the most seriously up until my late teens. But honestly, outside of that, it was just anything I could do. So netball, rounders, surfing, swimming, volleyball, basketball, just any sport, any club, any team that I could get myself to. If I could get there, I would do it. And I just love trying different things, being part of different teams.
And then you only got attracted to rowing famously only a few years before the 2012 Olympics. Was there any kind of, you've spoken about at university kind of not really being competitive in sport and there being a phase there where it wasn't a big priority. Was there never any risk of rugby stealing any of your attention?
I played rugby a few times when I was younger and I loved it. And I think at the time it was when there was a tussle between whether I was going to keep running and playing hockey. So there wasn't really a space for another sport. If in another life I had gone into rugby, I would have loved it. Yeah, I really would.
I think you'd have been great.
My little girl, I think I would love her to get into rugby because I think it's an amazing sport. And especially, in Cornwall, it's a big thing as well. Lots of Cornish support for rugby. So it's a bit sort of in the blood a little bit. So I'd love to see my kids getting into it.
It's a hotbed down there. She'd definitely encourage her to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
So good.
Yeah, it's good fun actually, and loads of clubs, local clubs now, it's really sort of trying to jump on board and doing, like Minchinhampton have started doing a specific girls sort of session on a Sunday. Mia doesn't want to go and do that though. She wants to go with the boys, but there you go. We'll see if that's true when contact comes in. I think she might change them, but we'll see. Yeah, definitely get out there and do it.
Yeah.
You're on the water, aren't you? So are you constantly in in there on kayaks, and then if they do something wrong, is it an ice bath? Just throw them off the side and into the lake, and they can.
Yeah, we live by the river, and so it means that we can, go out and use the kayaks and canoes. This time of year, we only use the canoe with them because it is very cold and a bit. When the weather's like this, it's a bit risky to do anything too big with them. So we just take them out in the canoe and things. But yeah, in the summer, Logan was so he would have been just turned 3, and he was going out on the paddleboard, falling in and kind of learning that you can like make mistakes, fall in, get back on, and also a little bit of consequence as well, because it was cold and he didn't want to fall in after that, because he was mucking around on the paddleboard, doing what he shouldn't be doing. Steve kept saying, sit down. He fell in and then never stood up again. So
I went in the side because that was one of the things in lockdown that we did. We went because we're not too far away from sort of Cirencester Lakes, and I took them paddleboarding. And Mia was all right because Mia's she was 7. She would fall in on purpose and swim around. Lena would refuse to get on a paddleboard with me because I'm quite big. Actually, not very good at paddleboarding. Falling quite a bit, so Lena hated going with me because it meant she was going to get wet, so she would go and cling onto a friend's leg rather than hang out with me. So yeah, interesting.
How did lockdown change your going to work, your training routine?
Do you know what? So it was a really weird time. When I look back on, say, even this time last year when I was training with 3 sort of babies, it almost feels like it didn't happen in a way. I think the way that most people look back on their pandemic year of 2020 is like, does that really happen? And I definitely feel like that, and I feel like that about the Tokyo Games as well. I mean, you say going to work, but work was in the living room, and I would do I remember doing a session on the row machine, and it was just like outside the kitchen door, and I finished and I looked over, and it was during their nap time. And in the time I'd been on the row machine, all 3 had woken up, and I looked over at the end, and all 3 just had their faces pressed up against the glass, just like watching me in the last few strokes. And I was like absolutely dying, dropped the handle, could barely breathe. And I looked over and I saw my 3 kids there, and I thought, yes, this is awesome that you're seeing this, because if it had been a normal year and if it had been something I'd done, every day would have involved me leaving, going to a training centre, coming back, and them having no clue what it looked like to do this. And so they watched everything. They watched every session, every stroke, pretty much. They were around for. So it's something that, yeah, there would never be another time in your life that you'd be able to do it like that.
It was interesting with that is because Steve had to be around as well. I assume he couldn't really have done. He wasn't doing much work, filming or work and stuff like that. So that obviously takes a huge pressure off you because again, even if you were in lockdown, you wouldn't be able to do it if he was off doing filming or whatever. So it's definitely. I imagine it was a huge team. It's a team effort, that one, isn't it?
It was just this kind of collision of so many different circumstances where, I had been retired for 4 years. After Rio, I just never saw a single reason to get back in the boat again. And 4 years later, I went into 2020 in the new year, and it's the first time for 8 years that I'd seen in a new year and not been going to the Olympics that year. And I always feel like whenever you go into a new year of an Olympic Games, you think this is the year. And you've only got 6 months or so. And you think I remember waking up on the morning of 2012 and going, this is Olympic year. 2016, this is Olympic year. 2020, I woke up and I went, this is the Olympic year. Like, I'm going to watch it on the sofa. I was 9 months pregnant with twins. I'm excited to see what happens. And then 2 months later, I've had twins. I'm thinking about making a campaign after 4 years out. And I think it was a collision of circumstances. That there was just no world in which that would have ever happened before. And all Steve's work got wiped from his calendar, so he could kind of be there to have the kids when I was training and things. So it was just an opportunity that was like weirdly almost too good to miss.
How did the idea really come about? I mean, as you say, you sat there thinking 9 months pregnant, I'm just going to watch it. And then at one point, did it come into your mind and go, actually, it's obviously been put back here. Are you saying there's a chance? So how did it go from, are you saying there's a chance to, no, I'm going to do this? So was it a gradual sneak up? Oh, wow. Because I remember I obviously watched the documentary, and you were like, oh, okay, that's a good time. I'm actually not far away from my old times. And was it sort of each one of those little moments was like, well, let me just train a little bit harder? Or did at some point you just go, right, no, this is it. I am actually doing it?
Yeah, it was such a gradual thing. Every time I got on the rowing machine to do some exercise, I never would have even gone on a rowing machine if it wasn't for lockdown either. So I was just enjoying doing other things, other sport and other fitness, just because as a way of life. But being at home and the rowing machine being there, that's what I did. And every time I got on, I saw my scores getting a bit better. And like you say, I just got really close to what I used to do when I was training full time on the team. And I thought, and that sparked the idea. But then I thought, why? Why would I do this? Why would I go back? Why would I put myself through this year? And every time I thought about it, I always came back to the kids. And I thought, and I've got a little girl to inspire now, and I've just got this year where actually, what else in my downtime am I going to do? And at that point, I didn't think it would happen. I thought I could give it a go, maybe last till Christmas, and then realize I'm being ridiculous and kind of forget about it. But it just kept going. I almost did like a weekly check-in and thought, are the kids happy? Am I happy? Am I still improving? All three are still true. So I'll just keep going another week. It was never like I'm going to do this moment. It just kind of carried on.
Do you think Logan will remember? But I always have this thought, like when I retired, Mia was 6 months old, so she'd never really ever seen me play. Obviously, they watched you train, but do you think they'll remember? Do you think in any way they'll remember that, and or are you going to be getting out the videos and going, look, this is what I did in 2012? And
I thought he wouldn't remember, but he does talk about it now. And if he ever sees me in like my rowing kit, if I'm going to go out for a paddle or something, he knows. He said, "Mummy, are you going training again?" And he does remember it now. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of his first memories is of me kind of training and things like that. And I think probably people spoke to him.
Mummy used to fall off a rowing machine quite often in the lounge.
Yeah, it's probably actually quite a disturbing image for him to remember. So
I think that's the bit for me, because we used to train at Bisham Abbey, and we used to see some of the rowing guys and how hard they used to train, and just the natural kind of individual nature of the sport, despite obviously sometimes you're in a team and whatnot. Like the fitness levels are incredible. Like we sometimes think we work hard as rugby players, and it's nothing compared to that. The hours that it's an unbelievably ridiculous, in my opinion, sport in terms of how much you have to put in. So in order to come back to a state, because you must have obviously you're incredibly fit anyway, and you must have kept yourself in great shape, but it's not a sport that you can just decide to come back to. It's you one mentality wise, but also your body in terms of what you have to put it through is, in my opinion, insane, to be honest.
I think probably one of the most frustrating things about rowing and the training is it is just a kind of a numbers game in terms of time put in. You have to put in a lot of time because it's non-impact. You can sit on the rowing machine, and apart from having to look after your back, it's really kind on your joints, which just means you can keep rowing and keep training, and you're not pounding the streets and you're not getting any kind of contact. So you really can just train your CV system for as long as you can during a day, and you can get as strong as you possibly can during a weight session and just keep doing it. So it does allow you to do 3 big sessions in a day and do that almost every day of the week. And so I think, yeah, coming back to that was a big commitment. But because I was doing it at home and I had kind of a bit of knowledge behind me about what I'd done before, I could write my own program. I could do it my way. And if it didn't fit in with the kids, I didn't feel guilty because I had no one to let down. So it was just a kind of trial and error. I did train less than I had done in any other Olympic cycle, just because I was never happy to kind of put the kids second to it. So yeah, it is very time consuming, which it's tricky to juggle with 3 kids.
Do you think if the world had been the normal world and COVID hadn't have been a thing, you would have done the same thing? You would have been able to have done it? No way.
I think that the thing that so the only other mother who's tried to come back into the team was Anna Watkins, and they won in London with Catherine, and she wanted to come back to Rio. And I definitely think the thing that she found was, you're in a centralized system where you have to go into training, and the training schedule of 60 people in a team is not going to necessarily be put around your one baby, and so it's really hard to kind of make it work when you're working with other people in a big team. I just can't see a way that I would have been happy to make it work if it hadn't been for doing it from home.
At least with Zara, she can plan her own. She plans her own season. She's fully individual. She does it. It's also helpful that it is, most of the horses are at home as well. So, yeah, I can see if you're in that team environment where you have to go in and train and you have to leave every day and then be away every day, it just creates logistical nightmares in itself, especially with Steve working as well. It would be harder. It's fun, yeah. It actually was a perfect little window for you, wasn't it?
Having that ability to kind of look after my own training with my own body that was new and different to before, and I would have gone back with having had kids, and all the 20-year-olds that were on the team now would be in a totally different phase of their training and their life than me. So actually being able to look after my own training, even though I didn't have the sports scientists around me, was probably quite refreshing as well.
Should the structure be that adaptable going forward? Should that be the norm?
I think it will be. I do think there's been a shift, and I think partly that's because of what I did and had the kids, and partly that's because at one point the entire team was training from their homes and had never been trusted to do so before, and they still did the training. It's like, see, I can be trusted to train from home and send you my scores and communicate with the coaches. So I think there'll be a shift, and I think if they want people to come back into the sport and have a longer career and have a longer lifespan in rowing, then there will be a little more work-life balance.
Because rowing is known for being quite savagely demanding. I mean, just no time off, just endless hours working. And as you say, the 20-year-olds are in a very different place to where you found yourself at that stage. And it does seem now, when you listen to your story, that surely this should be a sport that should be allowing its athletes to kind of get there whichever way they do end up getting there. What was your new body like? In what ways was it better or more challenging? What did you gain? What did you lose?
So it's really hard to kind of actually put your finger, and there's so little research and scientific kind of evidence for any of it, because there's so little research done in females in sport or in postnatal females in sport. I mean, some of it must be psychological. I mean, there was nothing I've ever done that's more painful than childbirth, and then you get back onto a row machine and it feels like a holiday. You're like, this is, I know I've gone through something worse than this. So there's definitely something psychological, and whether that increases your pain threshold or something, I don't know. But I felt in many ways stronger. In many ways, I obviously had to work on things because my body had been through this huge different thing. But yeah, I don't know what it is. But yeah, I think that, I mean, with that kind of single-mindedness, definitely between London and Rio, I was almost fearful of doing anything else, of being anything other than a rower. And everything was about rowing. Training takes up so much of your time. And the time that I wasn't training, I was being the athlete. I was watching video analysis. I was having physio sessions. I was doing everything about being a rower. And then this time round, I was not prepared to go back to that, because that would mean not doing everything I could as a mum. And so I remember there was one day where we had a half day. So we had 2 sessions in the morning and then the afternoon off. And in the change room, everyone was talking about the fact that they were just going to go and lie on the sofa. And that's exactly what I would have done when I was training full time. And I remember they said, oh, what are you going to do? I said, oh, I'm going to take my kids to the farm park. And I remember going to ride tractors and look at horses for 4 hours in the afternoon with the kids. And it was quite refreshing, because I remember thinking, actually, I wouldn't have believed you could do this and have other stuff in your life before. And I was too scared to explore the possibility that you can do other things because you don't want to start losing. So yeah, I think that maybe it'll open up to the fact that, actually it's quite healthy to have other things in your life.
You mentioned the fact that you kind of took it really slowly, and because you weren't in that very set training program, you had enough space and enough flexibility to do it your way. At what point did you and Polly then decide, okay, this is a thing, and then you are committed to being a teammate for someone else, and it does become a bit more there is more responsibility there.
Yeah, so in the new year of 2021, Polly and I were put together to row in a pair, just to train together, because we had both had quite different routes in. So everyone else who had their quite solid year of training at home, I had just 6 months worth of rowing as a comeback. And Polly, although she'd been training full time for the previous few years, she had gone back to she's a doctor, and she'd gone back to the NHS to work during the pandemic. So she's just a phenomenal person. And so they said, okay, you two have had quite like wobbly starts to this last 6 months. We'll put you in a pair together just to train. And in the May, we ended up going to the World Championship, the European Championships together in the pair. And we actually won. And, I didn't expect to win another title in my career. So to become European champion, I hadn't even been rowing for a year after having the twins at this point. And so it just made sense to keep us together. And for me, a big part of that decision, not only was it to be able to row with Polly, and who I love rowing with, was also the fact that 2 people is much easier to organise than 4 or 8. And I didn't want to kind of have to let anybody down. And so Polly was massively understanding about the fact that I might be late, or I might have to change things, or I might have to do some training from home. And so it just worked really well for both of us.
You said you were doing. I'm always wondering, what does video analysis of rowing look like? So what are you? Because I get it in. I obviously get it in our sport, but I'm like, what are the nuances that people don't know that you're looking for in rowing in terms of?
You just get really down to the geeky millimeters of.
It's technique stuff.
It's all technique. So you're looking at frame by frame. You're looking at an oar going into the water, frame by frame, and working out whether the oar is going in one frame too early or too late, and whether you've moved your seat, whether you started pushing before the blade's fully covered. And it all kind of seems like the tiniest detail, but you take about 4 million strokes in an Olympic cycle and about 250 in an Olympic final. So if you kind of made a millimeter wrong for 4 million times, and you do that in an Olympic final, then you could lose by half a second. So that's the kind of small narrow detail you're looking at. But yeah, it's I found it fascinating. And then you step away from the sport and you look back and you think that's the most boring thing for anybody else on the outside.
I was going to say, I thought watching back moves was bad, Scaz, but I think I think for the first time ever, I think we're winning. We're winning on that.
100%.
Let's compare and contrast rugby and rowing. I guess on the surface, it seems like 2 very different sports, but yet in rowing, you are working in a team, right?
I think there's loads of comparison actually between rugby and rowing. The bigger the boat, the more you get to that. Actually, our coach, Robin, always used to say that 8's like a rugby team. Because actually so much of your result is going to rely on your ties and your relationships as a crew. And you go through the season and you start with a squad that's too big for the number of seats available. And as people get whittled down, you're losing your friends, you're losing your teammates, but they're also your competitors. And so when you finally get that seat in the boat, it's super important to create those ties, because you've spent some of your season working against each other to make sure you get your seat. And then once you're in that crew, it's such a crew mentality. And often, you do find that the boats really kind of buckle down into themselves and become their own thing, their own bubble, their own unit, and become really, really tight. But the years that I found the whole team has done the best is where each unit is really distinct, really strong, really positive, but can support each other, can support the other boats, can support the team as a whole. But it's a really fine level, because in training you're still competing against the other boats. You go to the World Championships, you're never going to compete against the other boats in your team, but you still want to kind of do well as a comparison to them. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember the Rio 8 that went out, the women's team. They had an amazing relationship with each other, where they were really proactive with team building activities. They would they would go on like just like cinema trip together, or like make an effort to do something outside of rowing, and they were the strongest 8 that we've had in our history. So it definitely works.
I was just going to ask, do you actually socialise outside of rowing with each other, or is actually that the time where you're like, no, fed up, we've spent too much time together, let's go and do something different? Because certainly for us, like, we genuinely do love spending time together off the field, at the gym, all of that sort of stuff. And actually, I think we spoke a little bit in the previous episode about some culture stuff, and actually building a natural, organic culture of where you are going out for food, to the cinema, doing something that's completely different away from your sport is actually sometimes the best way to build those relationships.
Yeah, I would say there's a real correlation with the most successful crews are the ones that actually genuinely like each other, genuinely spend time through choice with each other outside of the sport. Heather and I, we rowed together for 10 years and would still hang out together, would choose to meet up after training and do something together, or at the weekends we'd go for a bike ride. We weren't like craving time apart, because we enjoyed each other's company, we enjoyed rowing together, and so why would we kind of not want to strengthen that bond away? And definitely, I know you mentioned kind of training at Bisham Abbey, and something that the rowers look around. You're there lifting in a gym, and you gain so much from the people from other sports that you're looking at. And definitely with the women's rugby team in there, you see people lifting, and you see that team rallying around a lifter, and you're all cheering each other on, and you're all absolutely championing them to lift that weight. And I think sometimes in rowing, you can go into the gym and be in your own blinkered headspace and almost not wanting to cheer the other person on because they're the person that could take your seat. But you build each other up, you lift each other up, and whoever gets in that boat will make the boat go fastest. And I think that's the mentality. Whenever we've been a successful team, you've heard cheering in the gym, you've heard support, you've heard people like wanting each person to be the best they can be. And I feel like that's definitely that kind of the hockey teams have that really well as well at Bisham Abbey. The hockey and the rugby, real classic team sports, do that well, and when the rowing does it well, they perform better.
I think it's too hard. Like, you go through too much to not, if you don't like each other, I just don't think you'd do it. I don't think you'd be able to, especially in rowing.
The recruits that are put together of people who, because you don't choose who you go with, the coaches choose, and there are people who don't necessarily like each other, and they don't last for the next season, and they could be the most amazing athletes physically, but if they don't quite blend together in a boat, it's not going to be as fast as it should be.
Should we play meanie then and go, right, tomorrow you've got one race again, who are you picking, Heather or Polly?
If I'm racing tomorrow, I'd go Polly, because she's
Well played. Good answer. That's a good answer. Well played.
I saw Heather only yesterday, so she would be right. She had a baby the exact same time I had the twins, so we've both got 2-year-olds, so we kind of meet up, and she wouldn't mind me saying that she's not as fit as she was.
What race is your? Because obviously, I mean, whenever you get to the point where you can say you're a quintuplet champion, it's quite nice, isn't it? Say a quintuplet, just one's nice, but quintuplet. Which race did you feel that was it? You were most in sync. You felt you were unbeatable that day. You get that, don't you? You wake up one day, or you're on the pitch and you go, I actually feel great today, and it all goes to plan. Is there a race that jumps out where you just knew that you were so on it?
There's a race that
be impossible to lose.
In 2015, we raced the World Championships, and the World Championships a year before the Olympics is always really important. If you stamp your authority that year, people's decisions on what they do in Olympic year are going to be based on the last time they raced at the World Championships. And so for me, I always put a lot of pressure on myself to race that World Championships well. And in 2015, year before Rio, Heather and I had the race of our lives. Even the team manager came out and said that was one of the best races he'd ever seen. And we just kind of, like you say, everything was in sync. I can't remember a lot about the race because we were in the zone, and we won by way more than we should have won by, just purely because we got it right on the day. We were in the right frame of mind. And I always look back and think that was like the pinnacle And even though, say, the next year we didn't actually tap into the exact same racing again, having done that race and having like laid down that gauntlet meant that we went into Rio year on a high, almost feeling like we were inaccessible to the other crew, or the other crews maybe feeling like we were inaccessible just because of that one race that we did. So that always I think was a really important one for us.
Because that feeling you must have taken into Rio was quite a different one to what you had pre-London, wasn't it? In terms of where you guys were at, probably the expectation, the pressure, all of that sort of stuff that was on you between the two Olympic Games. That must have been quite different.
It was so different. Like London felt like it was almost like this freedom to think how I wanted to think, to act how I wanted to act. We were underdogs, unknowns. I'd been rowing for 4 years. We hadn't won anything significant. And even though we were favourites, you'd have to know quite a lot about the sport. And you'd have to really look at the results to realise that we were favourites. We weren't on the front pages of papers. We weren't headline names. And I loved that. And I would have had that time and time again. I love that feeling of no pressure. And when we won, I'd have been devastated if we hadn't, because we knew that we should win. But when we won, it was just like this feeling of pure relief. I almost couldn't celebrate. I didn't believe I was Olympic champion, and I couldn't call myself Olympic champion for about 6 months. It felt so surreal. And then when we went to Rio, everything was flipped on its head, and there was so much pressure and people expecting us to win and people talking about us almost as if we had won already and we hadn't even raced. And it was a very, very different feeling. But it did mean that when we won, I was like punching the air. I had like ownership of it straight away, and I really kind of felt like we had won straight away.
I don't know. I quite like the pressure. I quite like the pressure side of it. I think it that first one always gives you outs. It's always good to win it, but I actually quite like where people expect you to win, because then you know you have to turn up. I quite like that pressure. It makes me get in the zone more than.
But do you like at the time, like when you're actually in it, or is it in hindsight that you like it?
No, I think. Well, that's a good question. I think I would say that I liked it when I was in it, but then if I could cast my mind back there, maybe it wouldn't be that way. But I was never nervous about stuff. I was always excited about. It was nerves. Right. Obviously, you always get nerves. You can't control nerves, but it was more out of excitement for a game than a fear of failure. If you. But then
it's like.
Personally, I always little doubts always crept into me just before we went out, which was always weird to me. I could always mentally sort of see good things happening about what we'd trained, but then just before we went out, there'd be little moments of what happens if this goes wrong? I'm like, why are you in there? Get out! Get out.
What about you, Emily? Were you quite paranoid or?
I think I've gone through a real cycle with it, and we spoke about it when we spoke to Kate Richardson-Walsh and through her journey. I think, like, as a youngster coming in, probably similar to yourself, it was all just like anything you did, everyone was like, oh, how good's that? Like, brilliant, well done, crack on. And then you get to a point where you've done that for a bit, and then it's like, right, well, if you don't keep doing that, why aren't you doing that? And that's probably then when it's like everyone looks to you and it's like, well, come on, like, we need something here. That's kind of your job. And I think for a period, I didn't mind it. And then all of a sudden, you probably, as you get a bit older, it probably starts to weigh a bit heavier. But I think, if I'm honest, at hindsight, I probably didn't realise it was weighing a bit heavier until I've reflected back on it. Whereas now I've probably, again being quite a bit older, come over the other side of it and actually just kind of come back full circle to that 8-year-old, just loving what I do. Obviously, I've picked up a decent injury this year, so I've been out of the game for a little while. But hopefully when I get back, it'll just be loving the opportunity. And I also a bit of a believer in the whole pressure as a privilege thing. I think, like, to have pressure and to feel pressure is because of everything you've done before, or, you know, the things that you've got in the bank or the experiences that you've already had. So I think sometimes that's actually, it's a good thing, because it's shown what you've done and hopefully what you're still capable of doing.
I think that's such a good way to put it. I remember our coach saying, I remember almost at one point being quite annoyed, like quite angry that people were talking about us as if we were just going to breeze it. And I remember saying to Robin, like, this is just not fair. They don't realise that we have to do the work, we have to do this. And he just said, Helen, they wouldn't be talking about this if you hadn't won all those races, if you didn't have that history. They put you on a pedestal for positive reasons. Don't look at it as a negative. So I think that's exactly right.
And
Yeah.
so where's your head at now, Helen, in terms of how's it being? Are you training much at the moment, or are you kicked back? Are you missing the environment? Are you, because that's obviously, if you step out of it, we actually didn't ask you how it was the first time, obviously, when you went off and you had Logan, and how was it being away? Did you always miss it, and are you back missing it now? Or is there thoughts of creeping in and can we go one more time?
It ebbs and flows, and I would say I am extremely happy away from the sport, and I don't miss it on a day-to-day in a way that I think is, do I need to be there? But clearly there's something that draws me back, because I wouldn't have gone back that third time. When I was coming up to Tokyo and I was realising how well my body was doing in coping with training, I definitely had this feeling of, I have more potential than I've shown so far, and I could be better than I have been. And I really started to get this sense of, I want to go to Paris, which it just hit me. It just really surprised me. And I did have this kind of thought of, okay, I'm going to go home. I'm going to just kind of get into training again and see how I feel. And it just didn't happen. Like the plane touched down and I was mum again, and the world had kind of opened up and gone back to normal. And I was just not doing the exercise that I needed to be doing. So right now I'm in a phase of, for me as an individual, I need to do something every day, some sort of exercise, some sort of training makes me the best version of myself. But I also think it keeps my hand in for anything that I want to do in the future, sport-wise. So I haven't walked away, I haven't officially retired, but as each week goes by and I'm not on a full-time rowing program, I think that kind of decision is basically being made for me.
Would you say with the kids, do you think they'll end up going down the rowing route? Because obviously the more like now, I still play, so they more end up watching me for mention. They sort of probably ask more questions about, why do people actually think you're a good rugby player? Because I'm definitely not anymore. But it's still fun. Do you think that they'll be on those? They'll go down that rowing road. Do you think they'll want to do that? Oh, it's a difficult one. It's one I always think about whether Mia will end up playing rugby, and whether she'll. Do you think what their sport is? Do you look like Mia every time they do anything? You go, actually, they're quite good at that. Maybe we should focus on that. Or they're probably a bit young at the moment. But where do you think your head will be around that space?
Rowing wise, I definitely have no intention of actively introducing them to it as their sport. I think probably that's because I have not come from a rowing family. I didn't know anything about rowing. I started when I was 21. So actually my only rowing friends are the ones I met on the team. I've got a really small rowing circle, and it's not being part of my history. It's not something I've always just thought, I'd love my kids to do this. So it's not something I have my sights set on for them at all. If they happen to row and enjoy it, fine, great. I do see a lot of value in other team sports that I grew up doing and watching. And my dad was heavily involved in rugby, and I remember watching my brothers play rugby. So rugby, football, hockey, netball. I love a team sport for what it can bring to a kid's confidence and life and environment. But then again, the character building nature of the individual sports, the swimming and the running, and so giving them every opportunity to try things, I think, is important. But I think they might reach an age where I do look at them and think, oh, that was a good throw, like that. That was.
Believe you me, it's not that far away. I promise you. Mia, I've been doing it with Mia since she's about 6, actually. Oh, hang on. Something there.
Yeah. Like golf. The gymnastics club.
No, I've got Emily. Golf is not. Scaz. Golf's not really working for me. She just doesn't have the patience. It's devastating. It's devastating.
That's the one you wanted, though, wasn't it? That would have been all your dreams come true.
I did a year of forcing her to go to lessons, and it didn't really. She's actually got a really good swing, but she's just not. It's not in there. I mean, even horses at the moment, she's sort of stepped away from. There's no. I think if there's no passion for them to go and do it, you don't force it on them. I think that's the best thing I've found. But I suppose with rowing as well, rowing's something that you sort of can stumble into when suddenly you're 14 and you're 6 foot. There you go.
Yeah.
Actually, that's something you possibly can be good at, isn't it? It's something I think they do a lot of recruitment quite late on in rowing, don't they? Because you just get people
lots
who
of
are
people,
long and tall.
yeah, and people go to uni and go to try new sports and try new things. Or there's a big thing like when you're a freshman, you turn up at uni. If you're tall, you'll probably be approached by the rowing coach. I remember when I was there, I started rowing when I was at Bath, and there were a lot of people coming over to rowing who had been injured, who had career-ending rugby injuries, and went into rowing because their scores on things like the 500 meter, which is about a minute and a half, their scores on those kind of rowing tests were really, really good. So a lot of people come in from other sports who have really good physical bases from other sports as well.
Thank you so much for joining us, Helen. It's been brilliant to learn from you and your experiences. And we'll be back with more next time on The Good, the Scaz, and the Rugby. Goodbye.